Dad bought Batesville when I was about 16 years old. It would have been 66. Dad wanted to buy a business. And I think a friend of his had heard about Batesville being on the ropes and said, maybe you can make a deal with the bank to buy the business. And Dad restructured the debt with the bank, and he bought, for $5,000, he bought 51% of the business. John ended up a great employee and a wonderful asset. Neil was John's brother. He did kind of the artistic stuff. He did a lot of pattern work and tooling and stuff like that. So when Dad took over, the way they were pricing everything was they sold everything on a per pound basis, whether it was just a raw casting, a machined casting, or machined, buffed, and plated casting. Prices were calculated based on weight only. And Dad took one look at that and said, this is crazy. Basically instituting some standard business practices. He put together a time card system so that they could track product going through the factory. When Dad took over, they were doing, I think, about $150,000 to $200,000 a year in sales. They were $300,000 in debt. But at the time that Dad bought this, the only building was the cinder block building on Margaret Street, and then a smaller building on the back, kind of almost like a lean-to where the buffing was done. They had a very, very small plating department and the foundry, and that was the entire thing. I think there were like 15 employees, 12 employees, something like that. Well, they did some machining from the very beginning, but mostly just drill press kind of stuff, drill press and tapping. The first CNC machine would have probably not been until the early 80s. Right after I turned 16, I came down and went to work there in August. Started out basically just 80 grit belt polishing Kenneth Kramer chair bases, which weighed 15 pounds. So if you do that all summer, you can do one-arm push-ups for the next year. So I started out doing that, and then I worked in the plating department as an assistant. Basically, I was doing racking parts and moving them through the plating department. I learned how to do the testing on the tanks for nickel metal content, copper content, balancing the pH, adding brighteners, changing out all the cleaners and stuff like that. There was no any type of hoist or anything. Everything was done by hand. You literally were leaning over cyanide and chromic acid tanks and putting these racks into that solution. But I got to learn quite a bit about plating, which was something that served me well for most of the rest of my career. After I graduated from Marion, so that would have been 74, 75, something like that, I came back as a sales manager. I got an account up in Indiana at FMC Corporation. Then I found out that there were all these fire truck companies all over the place that were buying very expensive, very crappy looking sand cast brass parts, and we could make the thing in zinc for about 30% less, and we could do all the plating and everything in-house. In a matter of about less than a year, I had brought on maybe 8 fire truck companies, and that's when the business really, I think, started to grow. The first big expansion was to the back of where the buffing room was. That probably would have been in the mid-70s, and then added on the third building onto the back of that, and then eventually the fourth building. There was an ad in the Sunday Enquirer it was from Ball Corporation. They were looking for a metals salesperson, and I think that would have been around 78 or 79. Went down for a job interview, and then I had to go tell Dad that I was going to take that job. But when I went to work for Ball, ironically, in 1981 or 82, the U.S. Mint came knocking on the door. At that time, the penny was solid copper, $1.20 worth of copper in every dollar's worth of pennies. In New Jersey, people were literally going to the various Federal Reserve banks and buying up truckloads of pennies and scrapping them for the copper value. So the mint had to do something. So I had 5 pounds of penny blanks and brought them down to the shop at Batesville, and we had a little miniature barrel plating thing. I plated 2 or 3 pounds of these things, packed them up, shipped them down to my boss. He got them into work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 8:10 in the morning, the president of the division was calling me up saying, "What did you do?" And so in 1999, in the run up to 2000, we were shipping from Ball Corporation 42 tractor trailer loads of penny blanks every week. I think we did 22 billion penny blanks that year. I've literally traveled all over the world. I've had such a fantastic career and such a wonderful life. And actually, I would not have been able to do any of that but for my early experience with Batesville, with electroplating and zinc. Think about all of the family members that have wandered through there at various times. It seems like everybody did a turn at the wheel down there. That's a good underlying story to this general success of the business. I mean, I don't think Dad would, I think when he bought it, would never have believed it would turn into what it is today.